What's your biggest marketing story since we last recorded on July 22nd? Duncan, what would you say is the biggest marketing story since the end of July?
Wow. Trying to think now. Biggest marketing story.
Do you
Should
want me
have.
to start with Ian?
Yeah, maybe start with Ian. You got to prompt me a little bit better here. Sorry.
Duncan, we put everything on a spreadsheet and you look at the
Yeah.
questions ahead of time.
Well, it's fair.
Okay, well, Duncan's going to give it some thought. Ian, your biggest marketing story.
My biggest marketing story since our last podcast is actually a very recent one. It's been in the works for some time, but just recently, the Justice Department has sued Google for allegedly using its dominance to control the search engine market. So, Google has been it's been reviewed by the courts in the US for a while about this antitrust allegation, and the court has now found them guilty. So, there has been some talk about the possibility of having to break up the different sections of Google, so it could be that things like Maps, Mail, Ads, YouTube, all these elements that currently are under Google, they have to be broken out into separate companies, which is obviously interesting, as particularly it's related to the search element, and obviously that's something that we do a lot of work with when it comes to search ads and stuff like that. So I found that very interesting. I'm sure it will be a long process before anything actually comes out of it. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes another year. But the fact that they have found them guilty, I think in the last few days, is
Yeah, this is very recent. Like I was watching a story on it yesterday.
Yeah.
But you're right though. This is being talked about for years. Like the
Yeah,
idea that they've kind of cornered the market, especially on search.
Yes, yeah. I saw a few different news stories about it during the summer, but at that stage it was still sort of being reviewed and everything. And I think it is literally within the last 24 hours or so that it's the
I think a lot of the big five are definitely looking at that with that meme with the eyes like this, the guy like this, and he doesn't. They're kind of like, well, I hope this doesn't affect me, but
yeah.
the reality is they want to probably break up Google, so that might mean that like YouTube and Google become separate companies. I also think this is partly why Alphabet might have been formed in the first place, is just to kind of avoid this. But that's the kind of reality that we're looking at. But it's hard to see what that impact will be until we know. So a lot of uncertainty in that space. I mean, I know personally, there's lots of things that I'm just not using Google for anymore because it's an inferior product to some of the other things that are out there, like ChatGPT, some of the newer versions of it, for answering more detailed questions. Anyway, it's interesting.
No.
We'll find
And
out.
I would say, while they continue to be dominant in search, Ian and I were talking about this earlier, like all it takes at this point is for one of these AI based companies to make some sort of big revelation and they could leap ahead of everyone else. Like I think we're at that tipping point where the next big thing could literally be around the corner and that could really impact this whole idea of chopping Google up to begin with. So but you're right. This will probably take some time. In an effort to make sure Duncan is fully ready for the question, I'll go next. Although,
okay.
No, if you know, no, I want you to go then.
Yeah, so I did open a window just to take a quick peek, and then I'm like, oh wait, you know what? Something came to me rather quickly. I mean, I think for me personally, the U.S. election, obviously the shift between Biden to Kamala happened while we were away this summer, but how quickly the marketing team for Kamala Harris got on that train, and how much material they had ready, especially for things like TikTok and Instagram, and how clever that material was. I don't know who's managing that social media account, but they are doing an A+ stellar job at interacting with the Gen Z millennial age, the meme culture age. Like they are so quick, so fast. It's been really fun to actually watch as a marketer, as well as just a human being interested in what's happening down to our neighbors to the south. But I would say that that's from a marketing world. Like obviously elections play a huge role, and there's a lot of marketing that goes into elections. But it's probably one of the first times I've seen a campaign that was so purposely built for a set audience, content-wise, and done so well and so effectively. Because I think TikTok is one of those things that is very tricky for businesses and marketing to make content that engages with that audience. And that campaign is doing it phenomenally well. And I'm curious how that will impact the upcoming election here in the U.S. But I guess for me, that's one of the main things that I would say has been a real shift in marketing, just something that you don't really see every day. And I'm sure it'll be talked about for many years to come on when we see the impact of that election. And I'm hoping it's a good impact, but we'll find out.
And I mean, it reminds me that we're still talking about, remember when Obama really embraced social media?
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the next, variation of it where and you're right. Like, I think it'd be just fascinating to be in one of those like social war rooms where you have to do things so quickly and so well and so on brand and voice. Like, I think it'd be so cool to see how they do that kind of stuff. And it reminds me a lot of like a sports team, like how fast they can do stuff too, right? Like, it's super
the speed in which they're getting. I mean, they have probably so much material to sift through because of all of her opponent Trump's
like press conferences,
speeches,
and things they've done in the past.
But then combining all of that to make these quick, hard-hitting ads, and then literally just having Kamala at the end of it is saying, "I'm Kamala Harris, and I endorse this message." And it's literally
and it probably has to run through legal at some point.
Yeah, and then it's just really well done, very quick, very on point, and I think that's what you need nowadays. But whoever's doing that, A+.
Duncan, I thought for sure your story was going to have to do with the percentage that we have to add on to ads in Canada now.
Well, that's just annoying, but it is what it is. Because of course, if the government comes down and hands down a fee on Google, who ends up paying for it? Well, it's the consumers that use the service, not Google itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Google introduced a new fee for all ad users in Canada, where they basically are passing down the buck of the fees that we have to provide to our government as a result of using Google services, and they just make it so that the advertisers themselves pay it and not Google.
No.
Great.
That ties into the whole political thing too, Duncan, about what elections do, etc. There you go. We see how we tie that together. And you know what? My news story ties into TikTok that you talked about. So basically, you set this whole segment up by not knowing what you were going to talk about at the start, which is
You're welcome.
Impressive superpower. My big news is actually more about no news. And as that January deadline approaches, there's really no new information about the TikTok ban. And, it's gone to court. In September, there was a drip of news, but it's really gone quiet. There were a few bits of information about, allegations or what people were going to say or what kind of information was going to come out. But with this thing supposedly supposed to kind of come to a head in January, it looks like it's probably going to drag far beyond that. I mean, the election being wedged in there is probably going to impact it greatly. And I think it just goes a lot to when we think about the news cycle, how it was a really big story months ago, and then the world happens and things happen and it goes to the bottom, and maybe it'll make an appearance again. But for a platform that is so widely used, especially in North America where this ban is really happening, the no news is kind of being interesting to me. There hasn't been much about it at all lately. So
I just don't think they have a lot of evidence that I recognize that China invested in TikTok, but I don't think they have a lot of evidence that they're being fed information.
Yeah, I don't, and I think that's probably.
If you saw them grilling the Singaporean owner, and you saw those videos, like you'd be like, well, this is kind of ridiculous. It makes our politicians look bad. So I don't know.
Yeah. He had to state numerous times that he was, I believe that's the CEO of TikTok, that he was Singaporean and not Chinese. So there you go.